move quickly on to Ukraine. Well, not so much Ukraine, but I suppose the UK and other nations. But Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, was very much keen to speak to several people around the world, and Ben Wallace was one of them. Well, he was basically saying this: trustworthy sources in different countries allege that Ukraine is preparing a provocation on the territory of their country related to the detonation of a so-called dirty bomb. Now, this is quite interesting because in the press release that the Ministry of Defence issued, there was no mention of a dirty bomb. So let's see what Ben Wallace's comments on this were. Here we go. At the request of the Ministry of Defence, I spoke with my Russian counterpart, Sergei Shoigu, this afternoon. That was yesterday afternoon. Minister Shoigu alleged that Ukraine was planning actions facilitated by Western countries, including the UK, to escalate the conflict in Ukraine. So no mention of a dirty bomb there, Brian.
Well, no, but of course, what are we doing on a full-time basis, which is helping to escalate the war?
Absolutely. He went on to say this: I refuted those claims and cautioned that such allegations should not be used as a pretext for greater escalation. It is for Ukraine and Russia to seek resolution of the war, and the UK stands ready to assist. Now, honestly, when you use the word lies with politician, most people, assume that they are synonymous, and this is one example of it, because of course the UK is not only not ready to assist a resolution to the war in terms of negotiations, but has actively acted to prevent those negotiations taking place. That was followed up then with a statement from the so-called P3. This is the United States, UK, and France. We, the foreign ministers of France, the United Kingdom, and the United States, reiterate our steadfast support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's ongoing aggression. We remain committed to continue supporting Ukraine's efforts to defend its territory for as long as it takes. No mention, therefore, of any efforts to start negotiations at all. This is about supporting Ukraine's efforts.
Well, we've got more billions, haven't we, pledged by the US and the EU and indeed UK to put the weapons and munitions in. So everything is about stoking up Ukraine. It's not about calming it down and getting a peaceful resolution.
Indeed, the statement went on. Earlier today, the defense ministers of each of our countries spoke to Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu at his request. Our countries made clear that we all reject Russia's transparently false allegations that Ukraine is preparing to use a dirty bomb on its own territory. The world would see through any attempt to use this allegation as a pretext for escalation. We further reject any pretext for escalation by Russia. The foreign ministers also discussed their shared determination to continue supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainian people with security, economic, and humanitarian assistance in the face of President Putin's brutal war of aggression, but again, no mention of assisting with encouraging any kind of negotiated settlement.
No, because they don't want it, is the answer. They don't want it. And obviously, we've got to take note of the fact that the billions pouring into Ukraine without any pretense on audited accounts means that we are going to suffer at home ultimately, which is what the bank's now starting to talk about.
Indeed. Now, I want to just talk about a little bit of fake news. Now, this was The Sun a couple of days ago. Oink, oink, boom. Putin may have used pig drones packed with explosives to blow up Nord Stream gas pipeline in Bond-style plot. This is a reference to a sort of remote vehicle that goes up the inside of the pipelines. Anybody that's seen James Bond films will know what we're talking about. And they're claiming that Putin will have used these to blow up the Nord Stream. However, this article appeared a couple of days ago in a publication called BNE Intellinews. Now, we'll talk about who's behind this publication in a minute, but this was the headline: explosive-laden drone found near Nord Stream pipeline. And this is what it said. Swedish authorities investigating the explosion that ripped holes in the Nord Stream gas pipeline reported on October 20th that found an explosive-laden drone on the seabed near the pipelines. The Swedish armed forces were called in to remove and disarm the drone. The drone was found near one of two strands of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline during a routine survey operation as part of the annual integrity assessment of the Nord Stream pipeline, Pipeline Journal reports. Except, unfortunately, Pipeline Journal reported that in 2015. And so this had nothing whatever to do with the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipelines. So if we look at the date on that, Friday the 13th of the 11th, 2015. And this article says, ruling out sabotage, the Swedish military has successfully cleared a remote operated vehicle rigged with explosives found near line 2 of the Nord Stream natural gas offshore pipeline system. And they ruled out sabotage because it was basically a NATO a NATO country's drone. I believe it was a Swedish drone, and they had lost it and they found it again, as you do, you know. So anyway, when we go back to the Intellinews article, it said this. It ended their article with this: the national identity of the drone has not been verified so far, as many countries use unmanned underwater vehicles of similar construction, Stolpe said, who's the Swedish spokesperson. And then if we go back to the 2015 article, it says the national identity of the drone was not verified so far, as many countries use unmanned underwater vehicles of similar construction, Stolpe said. So this is clearly fake news being pushed out by a mainstream outlet. And let's just have a look at who the main editor is in this BNE Intellinews website. This is Ben Aris, among the longest serving foreign correspondents in Eastern Europe. Ben Aris has been covering Russia since 1993, with stints in the Baltics and Central Asia. He co-founded BNE as a former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph and was a contributing editor at The Banker and Euromoney for a decade, amongst writing for many other publications. He's also a professional photographer. So I don't really know what's going on here, David and Brian, but I think quite an incredible piece of fake news being pushed out by a mainstream outlet.
Well, and our governments are supporting this type of thing. And in a minute, Mark Anderson will be joining us to talk a little bit about how children are being taught to identify fake news. And one of the things that they're told is to check if some old story is being maliciously used in order to get an agenda across. But of course, governments are backing this. Let's just pop up on screen the Daily Mail, because I had to do a double take on this one, because here was the Mail Online, 24th of October 2022, trending Russia-Ukraine conflict news. And there was Ben Wallace denies Russia's dirty bomb theories of false flag attack. And there's a picture of Ben Wallace with Shoigu. Now, I was very interested to see what this was actually about. Let's just blow the picture up so you can see it. And what is the headline from the Daily Mail? Russia and British defence ministers discuss Ukraine on phone call. Watch the full video. But the full video is nothing to do with the actual phone call. So let's play the video, because I think it's worth looking at. It's so appalling for a number of reasons. But just bear in mind, this is the video, which, according to the Daily Mail, is to do with a phone call.
Huge thank you. Большое пожалуйста.
Министерстве обороны, главное политическая обстановка в Европе становится все напряженнее. Внимание, запредельной концентрации внимания на вопросы, которые, на наш взгляд, могли бы решаться совершенно. Выступление через строчку угрозы санкциями не хотелось бы.
Thank you, Mr. Shoigu, and thank you for agreeing to meet at this time. Counter-terrorism and other areas of mutual concern, such as the Arctic and the High North.
So we've got a number of interesting things happening. We think that video clip is from February or thereabouts. Notice that there's no subtitling, so we can't hear what the Russian point of view is. We can only hear the English when Ben Wallace starts talking. So that is gross manipulation of the particular video clip. And then it transforms into a text on screen, which is back on the subject of the phone call. So, David, I don't know what your take on this is, but what is the Daily Mail doing here? It's either gross incompetence or it's deliberate propaganda and manipulation of the public mind by conflating what are effectively two different episodes in discussions with the Russians.
Yeah, but to what end? I mean, that didn't even seem to have much of a point to it. Okay, they had a meeting at some point, somewhere, and what's the effect of trying to get there? I'm not even sure what the point of that is.
No, well, all I could guess is that they're trying to perhaps make it appear that there's been such progress on the Western side that the Russians were sitting down again, but I do not know. I just find it highly manipulative. And perhaps that's an ideal opportunity to bring Mark Anderson in.